And now it is time for our last panel session, where we hope to bring together some of the big ideas and themes that have been discussed throughout the day and leave you with some thoughts on your own journeys. So can I now also invite up two other panellists, Nerida Kelton, who of course presented earlier, and also Bonnie Marshall, to join Huya and I up on stage. Now, you've met Nerida earlier, as I mentioned, but for those who are not part of the Sustainable Packaging breakout session, please let me introduce you to Bonnie. Bonnie Johnson is the Communications Manager at the National Retail Association and works alongside the NRA policy team. Amongst other things, Bonnie currently manages the Australasian Recycling Label, working in partnership with the Australian Food and Grocery Council, the Australian Institute of Packaging and the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, or APCO. So how I thought we might tackle this final session is I'll start with making a few observations. I've been lucky enough to be here all day. I reckon I've had the best seat in the house up front, having a chance to meet the speakers and the panellists. And I took a little bit of time during one of the breaks just to sort of try and pull out what are some key observations that I found from today. Firstly, my sense is that the dialogue that was happening today compared to the first Turning the Dial conference a year ago is that there is a sense of maturation within the F&B industry around the concepts of sustainability and circularity. And I'm keen to get the other panellists' take on this in a moment. But that was my first observation. The language being used, the nature of the presentation, the engagement that I was seeing between the exhibits outside and some of the participants. And part of that extends to there is now a sense that sustainability and circularity within this sector is no longer about trying to find a market edge. So yes, it's partly that, but that's not the key pitch. There's a reality settling that there are other drivers kicking in beyond wanting to just appeal to consumer demand. And in fact, the realities of things like increased requirements for ESG reporting for large suppliers, particularly the big chains, the pending introduction of emissions reporting from next year for larger organisations, but the reality that many of you will be part of Scope 3 emissions for these large organisations and you may sell your products into them. These are all coming down the line and they will impact all of us here. And there was a sense that was clearly being communicated. Again, I'm keen to get the panel's take on just how important this is for you in just a moment. The other observation, and what was touched upon a few times by some of the presenters, was that all of this is happening at a time when there are acute pressures on manufacturers, industry of all scales, but often felt most severely by small operators, SMEs. We've seen escalation in input costs. We have one of the tightest labour markets in history, at a time where there is significant change happening across industry and across society more broadly. So these were my, I guess, high-level observations. So what I wanted to do was to briefly ask each of our panellists just to provide a short reflection on those observations to see if they ring true from your expert positions. Please go. Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Josh. Yes. Look, I mean, I would agree with those reflections. I think we are in a rapid period of change and escalation around, I guess, not only the regulatory requirements and frameworks we are seeing starting to shift, but also our capacity for and level of global innovation is starting to shift dramatically. AI is just one of those elements, but while all of that is going on, we also have all of those pressures, as you mentioned, around, an extremely tight workforce. We are needing staff in certain areas more than ever, and everyone is competing for those same staff. At the same time, we are losing, significant, parts of our supply chain. We're having a less and less, young people are going into some industries that we need them to stay in, or we need to help become more palatable for those young, for the longer term. So I think we are at this incredible, this sort of pivotal point where we are under a huge amount of pressure, but also we are trying to respond to these significant global challenges. So in a sense, I'm not surprised. So I think, we have a long way to go. We are looking, we are starting to shift, but I think that it's going to take a lot of collaboration. It's going to take a lot of people and true collaboration. I mean, the number of people that I hear about who say, we haven't really talked to X, Y, and Z. We need to get over that. Like, we really, really deeply need to get over that at the most intrinsic level. At the circularity level, globally, when I was speaking to some of the international advisors from the Netherlands government, they said what we've observed about Australia is people don't really know how to talk to each other. And I said, yes, that is a challenge that we have. We stay in our silos and we don't actually get out, share the problem and solve it together. So we're not doing that yet. And if we can't do that, we're not going to get anywhere.
I think from the packaging perspective, the shift is so rapid. Which I think is absolutely fantastic. The biggest shifts for me, as I mentioned this morning, is that we are moving from a voluntary commitment, which has meant nothing, and we've achieved nothing, to a mandated federal government and agreed by every single state design standard. And that is absolutely one of the best things I think I'll see in my career, that we are finally going to have a country that has an agreed approach and a consistent, harmonised approach. And so for me, from a packaging perspective, all of the people that have to work in and design packaging, this is great because they're going to have consistent standards, they're going to understand exactly where they need to be. I disagree a little bit in the collaboration because I see it every day. And I think the packaging industry is doing a really good job of it. And the perfect example is Ardash and Tetra Pak and Saveboard and some of the amazing work that they're collaborating. And we have some really amazing collaboration happening where all of the associations across our value chain now all talk to each other pretty much daily, weekly. We all share our approaches, we work together, we collaborate. And I've never seen that before. And I think Bonnie can attest to that too. We have very deep collaboration now, and I think that's fantastic to see.
I'll just touch on that too. We work with small retailers, so your mum and dad, $2 discount stores, to the biggest companies in Australia and internationally as well. Something that we do recognise, of course, is that COVID has had an enormous impact on business, but it's not just COVID. Its margins are dropping. There are businesses that are literally considering not opening as long as they should be. Staff, power costs, everything like that feeds in. So when you're getting to those businesses and you're trying to talk to them about sustainability and everything like that, to be quite frank, they don't have time. They're often time poor, resource poor. They're not making enough money to consider that. And so what they'll often look towards is the large businesses that have a lot of resources, a lot of investment. They have specialists that work in particular categories such as ESG and sustainability, and they'll often look to those bigger businesses for a bit of guidance. We are seeing more collaboration than ever, and I used this example before. If we look at quick service restaurants as an example, we understand, you've just got a burger at McDonald's, but what you're not actually looking at is the very, tomato farmer, lettuce farmer, beef farmer. That all feeds in. So when you talk about collaboration, I actually think there's quite a lot. And for us, we kind of sit in the centre of everyone. We work from, farmers all the way through to retailers and organisations such as the AIP and APCO. And something that we're really finding is more than ever, a lot of those peak bodies are starting to rally together to work on shared things. The regulatory climate is quite considerate. We touched on single-use plastic bans before. There's 15 different, bans that have come through with all different regulations. And if you're looking at something as simple as, emissions, you've also got to look at things like packaging as well, food waste, textiles. We work with that industry quite extensively as well. Battery stewardship too. So it's not just one thing, and it's not in silos, but I would say that the collaboration there between industries is quite significant.
Bonnie, I might just stick with you, sort of an extension of my earlier question. Just how important is it, do you feel, that SMEs, including a number of the people in this room today, need to be across the pending emissions reporting requirements in relation to their operations? Again, noting that many may be well under the initial thresholds that are set, but recognising that they are somebody's Scope 3 emissions, and how much do they need to be up to date with what's coming?
I think emissions is very important. We actually work with the Neighbours Steering Committee. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. It's run by the federal government. Effectively, they will walk into a business, whether it's a small or large one, they'll walk into malls as well, and they help give you an assessment and energy rating as part of your emissions. So if you're unsure about it, of course, you're welcome to reach out to us as well. We have a dedicated ESG and emissions specialist. We work with businesses on that, and it's understanding everything from the fridge that you're running in your business, of course, to where your trucks are going, where your food's going, what happens if you have food waste. Packaging plays a huge part in this because, and we've touched on some fibre-based products before, but as an example, there are products that can come onto the market where your food lifetime is significantly reduced. So that's something that you need to consider as well. When we look at emissions, it is not just what you're emitting in terms of, your fridge use, your truck, your transportation, your energy costs, how long your lights are on. It's also the little things such as the food that you're throwing out at the end of the day, the packaging that you are using as well. So reach out to us. We, of course, provide this as a free service as well. So if there's something that you're unsure how to navigate, a lot of our role here is to just give you that guidance, and often for free as well.
Thanks, Bonnie. You mentioned NABERS as the terrific Commonwealth Government program.
Yes.
Nerida, what other federal and state programs would you just like to highlight as being, key things that people in this room should be really across and tapping into and making the most of? Just in a couple of quick minutes, if that's okay.
Well, the AIP, number one, because we're the ones that can help you with packaging. Look, I think that APCO is really important, because they are the conduit for federal and state government decisions. I mean, we're obviously the education service provider, but it starts with APCO. They will shift their role shortly once we get the national design standards, and that's going to be an even more important role for them, because they're going to be the ones who administer the eco-modulation and the EPR program that's going to be regulated by the federal government. So I think certainly you need to stay abreast with APCO, and if you're not a member, you should be. And then obviously for me, programs like DPIRD and Oz Industry and all of those, I think for the SMEs in the room, we don't have as many good SME programs as we used to. We used to work with a lot of them. I'm disappointed with some of the new programs that are coming out, because I don't think they support the SMEs in the way that they need to with circular economy, packaging design, and what we need to achieve for the SMEs moving forward. So I think we probably need to review some of the programs personally, and really look at what do we need for the next 10 years. And I don't think some of the existing programs are as good as they used to be.
Okay, that's good constructive feedback. And in the interest of time, I'm going to ask one final question to Huya. So we've spoken about the importance of existing programs to support this transition, but we can't just rely on government programs. Of course, the private sector and good old-fashioned entrepreneurial behaviour will help drive this as well. So in terms of what SMEs in particular and small producers who are really the backbone of the food and beverage sector, certainly the growers and the primary producers. What are some of the things that people can do on a local and regional scale through collaboration and innovation to move and be part of this transition?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Josh. Look, I think there's a lot, and I mean, particularly for SMEs, as Josh pointed out, there are a lot of challenges and pain points, and the running of your daily business is what is most important. I think one of the things that we can see that is really benefiting people is actually, and I mentioned it before, and it seems so simple, but actually, being a part of your associations or, becoming a part of your industry networks to understand what is happening broadly, and also to actually get the support around, it's not just you that is facing the challenges that you have, and a shared problem can be a shared solution. And particularly for Western Australia and other, Australia in general, one of the challenges that we have is the tyranny of distance. So solutions can be challenging around aggregation of volume, development of regionally, appropriately located infrastructure, etc., etc. So what I would suggest we would need to do at the regional level is to aggregate the, volume and outcomes, which will take lots of people getting together to actually solve those solutions. So I would say first and foremost, be a part of the solutions, connect in with DPIRD, make sure that you know your industry, your sector, and the other problem solvers that you can turn to for support along the way.
So, in a nutshell, communities of practice that are fostered and nurtured through programs such as this one or events like this are absolutely essential. Please join me in thanking Hui Atkins, Nerida Kelton and Bonnie Marshall.